shadows way too long. You always thought that you were weak, but babe, you're wrong. Shadows way too long. Yeah, you better step into the light, just give it a try. Think that it's time you let that spark out. You've been hiding in the shadows way too long. And who cares if you might mess it up? You're stronger than the others think. And who cares if you might mess it up? Go ahead and shine, darling. Go ahead and shine, my dear. 'Cause who cares if you might mess it up? Just shine. You shouldn't doubt yourself, 'cause you're a work of art. You should know that you are perfect with those flaws. Yeah, you better step into the light, just give it a try. Know that it's time you let that spark out. You've been hiding in the shadows way too long. And who cares if you might mess it up? You're stronger than the others think. And who cares if you might mess it up? Go ahead and shine, darling. Go ahead and shine, my dear. 'Cause who cares if you might mess it up? Just shine, shine, darling. Go ahead and shine, my dear. 'Cause who cares if you might mess it up? Just shine. And who cares if you might mess it up? You're stronger than the others think. And who cares if you might mess it up? Shine, go ahead and shine, darling. Go ahead and shine, my dear. 'Cause who cares if you might mess it up? Just shine.
Okay, I forgot how to turn off the music. Okay, let's go here. Okay, there we go. So I am not broadcasting today to Facebook. Okay, my internet's not behaving. I don't have enough juice. So Zoom here for members and YouTube for the public. So if you're on YouTube, say hi in the chat so that I know you're here. If you're here with me on Zoom, you can just use the regular chat in Zoom or simply unmute your microphone, which is the preferred way, right? So today's lesson is going to be one that I've taught before, but I think I need to do it in a much shorter way in this beginner kind of route. And it's about transferring your pattern. What I find even experienced rug hookers doing, missing the fundamentals on transferring a pattern. And we all get a little stressed because we want it to be on the straight of grain, because we've heard about all those vendors who don't put it on the straight of grain, right? So there is a way to have it perfectly on the straight of grain. It's not a magic trick. I think it's something that I did sort of automatically very early on because of my construction background. I never worked construction other than in my own home, but I was a project manager for an electrical company. And there's certain things that are just fundamental things that you do. And it's something that my husband taught me probably almost 50 years ago. So, and that's how to know that it's absolutely square. And I will talk about that. So let's get started. I'm going to switch over to my down camera. And The pattern that I'm using is called Little Flower. It's a free pattern in the membership. There's a little course in there called Little Flower. This is what my version of it looks like hooked. And there's, I think in the course, I think I have various other people's interpretation of this pattern. So if you hook this, be sure to send me an email with a picture of yours because I'd like to include it. And here's the all important pattern part. So this is a small pattern, just a little tiny thing. And in the smaller it is, the less important the lessons I'm going to teach you are. But the minute you start to get to like a foot or 2 foot or even bigger, then you really need to know what's going on. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to trace this, okay? And I have a couple weapons for tracing, not that one. So I like a flare marker, okay? And let me do something right here. Where's that? There we go, spotlight. Now you can see it a little bit better. Now it's really dark. This was really bright just a few minutes ago. I think it depends on what the sun is doing outside my window. That's why I broadcast at 4 and not usually at 2. Okay, so back to this. These are some of the markers that I would use. A simple flare marker. If you worked in an office like I did, if you said marker, this is what someone would give you. There was no Sharpie markers, right? So it's a flare marker. You can buy them individually at some stores, and you can get them in all different kinds of colors. If you have, I have a bunch of Tombow sitting around. Some colors I like better than others. You can take off this end of the cap, and that's got a nice little line that is easy to see. I'm going to use that for this particular purpose. In the past, we would use red dot. Okay, the problem I had with red dot is a couple fold. The original one, they stopped making. Someone else has come in and started making it, and it's so thick that you can't see through it. Okay, so I don't recommend the current red dot at all. I do have some old stock red dot if you're interested. It's not on my website. One of these days I'll do it, or I'll just sell it in one of the wool sales. But what I'm selling now instead, and now that I put that on there, you almost can't see that it's there, right? And I'm sorry my camera is jumping. It's got to be a setting that I don't know how to fix yet. So this one only take a minute, and then we'll move on to the other cameras. But what I typically don't do is I don't do all these straight lines going all the way around. This particular little pattern has a little border. It's intended to indicate where you would put the beaded stitch going around the outside if you wanted to make it like I did. But what I'm going to do is just transfer those lines by putting little L's in the corner, and that's all I'm going to do. Just a little L. If you get into the habit of never drawing a straight line in your red dot, your patterns in the long run are going to end up straighter. Then we do the main thing, which I'm going to trace this out really quick. And you clearly see why I don't draw my own patterns, why Chris Miller draws my patterns for me, because I never draw them the same way twice. Okay, so now I've got, let's turn that over. Now I've got the pattern drawn with little L's to indicate where the corners are going to be, right? So I'm going to take that, and unfortunately I transferred my camera to my hooking frame, so I don't have a nice solid surface underneath here. But what I would typically do is get this somewhere in the center. You could do some measuring. I'm just going to eyeball it. It's close enough. And then I'm going to take the marker that I'm going to use for my pattern. And that's a Sharpie Industrial. It's important that you get the Sharpie Industrials, because if you read the packaging, it's going to say permanent to, I think it's 300 or 500. I never remember. It might be 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Otherwise, when you apply steam, those other markers are not guaranteed to be permanent. This one is, and it doesn't cost that much more. So what I'll typically do is I'll just put a couple of dots. I've got 2 straight lines that I want to transfer, so I'm going to put 2 dots. And then I'm going to grab my favorite pencil for doing this, which is a Blackwing pencil. It's an artist drawing pencil. It has a nice dark line. And then I simply draw the lines. And draw the lines in the direction that make the most sense for you. If it's straight up and down, or if it's sideways, whichever works the best. Okay? None of them are working because I'm not working on a solid surface. So none of them are working for me. But then I go back and I line this up. And I'm going to line this up on one corner. I'm not even going to try to line it up over here. See how that's out of whack? I'm not even going to try to do that. I'm lining it up here where I started. And then I'm going to line it up here. And then I'm going to put 2 more dots, which will give me, and your pencil can decide to go on either side of that black dot. So even this is not 100% perfect, but what it's going to give you 100% for sure is that it will give you a square outline that is on the straight of grain. Okay, so now I've got those outlined. What I'll do at the end is go over them with marker once I have the main part of the pattern transferred. I don't want to do it right away because I might, be looking at it and go, oh, this one looks a little bit thicker than that one. So I might come in one or go in one on the other one, depending on how I wanted to adjust it. Here's where the rubber meets the road. You're going to line this up on 2 of the dots and then smooth your pattern on. Almost always, this will not line up. That's okay. The reason it's not lining up is because the fabric underneath is crooked. So all I'm going to do is pull on it a little bit, not too much. And I'm going to have to pull back the other way. Sometimes you pull the wrong way or you pull too hard, one thing or another. And if this were on a table, I should have thought through this part of the project a little bit further. And what I'm looking for are the uprights leaning, matching up. And they for the most part, they are matching up. If I move that over to get to here, then this would match up down here, and so on and so forth. What's going to happen is that your fabric is probably going to be a little bit this way or a little bit this way. And I want you to make sure that it's as square as possible before you start transferring your backing. The other way to be sure is to do the old construction trick. And that is measuring from the center. I usually just put a fingernail on it because I can't see well enough. And that is, these measurements match. Once those measurements match, it means that everything is lined up, and where the threads are going crosswise across each other, that's at a 90-degree angle. Then, and again, this is not going to work as good as it would if it was on a table, because this is spongy under here, right? So if this were on a table, this marker is going to transfer even better. But this dotless is so thin that even in this difficult environment, it is going to do the job, and it's going to transfer through very well. If you are trying to use what someone is calling a pattern is calling Red Dot, and they're like, oh, it's got blue lines on it. That's the only difference. No, it's not. The difference is it's a whole lot thicker. You have to waste your marker. You have to push down really hard for it to bleed through. You want something so thin that you could go to a palm reader. Whoops. they could read your palm through the Red Dot, right? You have to be able to see through it clearly in order for it to make it work. The less thick your tracing fabric is, the more ink will end up on your pattern. And then you'll end up with a nice dark line on your pattern like this instead of something more washed out. Does that make sense? Okay. So I am going to head over to Zoom. I don't see any questions in YouTube's chat. So for you guys on Zoom, I'm going to remove the spotlight and I'm going to take you guys out of focus mode. Oh, it was out of focus mode. There we go. And what questions do you have about transferring it to the backing? You're going to take the exact process I just went through, and it's just going to be a whole lot bigger. So Linda wants to know, what is the name of the pencil that I like to use? This is a Blackwing. You can buy it in most art stores. I don't know if they have them at Michael's. I haven't looked to see if they have these. You can definitely buy them online. I like Blackwing. I like their funky little eraser, because it's a flat kind of eraser. And I'm embarrassed to say I've used these for years. And I've just realized that you can replace the eraser. So they sell the replacements on Jet Pens, which is where I get most of my stationery from. And yeah, replaceable erasers. I mean, what's bad? That's pretty cool from my point of view. That makes me very, very happy. Whoops. Okay. What other questions do you guys have? The beauty of being able to transfer your own pattern is that you're not limited by what's being offered, on other websites or being offered, on the rug hooking websites as here's a pattern. You can do anything. You can trace a photo. You can trace several photos and take pieces and parts, trace just the parts you want, resize them, put them all together. That's kind of what we went through just recently for landscape specifically. We did in office hours with the membership, we did design. Landscaping design. How do we design a landscape? So we work through that. If you are a member and you're surprised to hear that, you can go back and look at the most recent replays. I don't have them in the course yet. The course is still available to members at 50% off. Once I have everything in the course, I'll raise the price to full price, and then it'll be available to the public. Okay, so I'm already caught up with questions. If you don't have a question about the process of transferring an image to your backing, then it can be anything about rug cooking. I always start out with these beginner lessons with a small lesson, but then we can talk about whatever it is that you're bugging you. These beginner lessons happen once a month, usually on the second Saturday of the month, which is today. Today's the day. And we can stay here until 4. That's my next appointment, which is going to be the hook-in that happens every Saturday. That's also free to everybody. Simply go to my website and find the link there and join the hook-in, which is more of a social event than it is a learning event. But if that is it and there are no questions, seems a shame since you all just got here. So for those of you who are watching it on YouTube and you can't find the chat, depending on your device, you might have to look below. You might have to look to the right of the video. If you've got the video blown up so it fills the whole screen, you might have to bring it back down so you can see the rest of the screen so you can find the chat. I do. There's a link in the description for this video. I call it dot. I call it because there's no dots. Some people think the dots are an advantage. I don't, because I've used so much of this. What I found is that a lot of times there'll be a little tiny crease in the fabric. That didn't matter. They just printed the dots on top of the crease. And so even if you straightened it out, then your dots kind of like wow out. You know, the dots were not printed with any kind of precision that would allow you to rely on them. So I'd rather they not be there than to have them there and have them wrong. This is dotless red dot. It's super, super thin, and it's cheaper. When they remade this red dot, it went from, I think it was like $3 a yard on average. We went for a couple of months without it, which is when I found this. When this came back from a new manufacturer, it came back thicker, which I wasn't happy about. And it came back at $6.75 a yard for red dot. Okay. You can get this as cheap as $2.50 a yard if you buy a bigger piece. The bigger the piece you buy, the lower the price per yard is. That's all. But if you only want 1 yard, you can buy just 1 yard too. And if you place an order, I almost always put a piece of that in your order, simply because I end up with a lot of it with like wrinkles in it. I'll end up with holes in it. I mean, so I'm quality checking it as I'm going through it, basically, is what it amounts to. I have, but not for rug hooking. Okay. I have, unfortunately, and it's by necessity, a lot of experience repairing plaster. And that's what Crack Stop is for. It's for repairing plaster. So I've used it from there. I've never sat down and tested it, but I can almost guarantee that it's not pH neutral, which means, yeah, it peels off and it, quote unquote, doesn't leave a residue. Get a microscope and prove to me that it didn't leave a residue. It's leaving a residue, okay? If that residue is not pH neutral, it's going to be aging the decay of your backing. And that's one place we don't want to start with that. The other main reason why, even if I didn't care about that, I don't use it, because Crack Stop is mostly holes, right? So it's hard to follow a line sometimes. I like this because it's mostly fabric with some holes, okay? So when I do a line on that, it stays a line. It's not a bunch of dots with my crappy eyes that I have to somehow connect, right? And so that's a real struggle for me. And if you have trouble with eyesight, or if you try to do any kind of a complicated pattern, this would be worth its weight in gold compared to something like that. Or what's the other one that racks? The tool, the wedding tool. Don't use that. That's mostly holes. And just a little bit of your marker gets on there. And it's hard to, trace it off and then put it aside and then look at it 2 weeks later. You might not even be able to recognize what you drew on it, because it's really hard to see. That's been my experience. That said, use whatever works for you. I like the dotless. I can see it clearly. I can clearly see through it to what's underneath. And when I draw on the actual backing with it, most of the ink goes through to the backing. I'm not having to go over lines 2 or 3 times. One pass and I'm done. I don't know about you guys, but it's not fun drawing patterns. Thank God Chris Miller thinks it's fun. That's why she draws my patterns. And I don't, because I was ready to close up shop and just never offer another pattern again. Okay. Let's see. There's a little bit going on YouTube. So Katrina, let me get this out of the way. Katrina says, I found the hook the other day, and you will definitely learn something from the ladies who are willing to share their experiences. I think she's just saying, yeah, we helped her one time. There was only a couple of us on, and she was confused about hooks, and we figured that out and got things pretty much figured out. Tools for you. Oh, Carol, she says, I have a question about backing. Does it matter what you use for a wall hanging to using as a mat? The backing question isn't a focus of, is it a wall hanging or is it a floor? All backings are subject to time. And what happens is burlap is going to rot first. It's just a scientific fact. If you take the fibers that are made up of burlap and the cotton fiber, and then the flax fiber from linen, and you study them, and there's reports on the internet, and the one that's going to rot the first is going to be burlap by a huge margin. Then cotton and linen are really close to each other. And then wool is another mile down the road. Wool is going to last the longest. So what's going to happen to our artwork is that the backing is going to rot first. So you can use it as a wall hanging. You can use it as a rug. I've had people say, but no one's going to be walking on the edge. It is not foot traffic that is the problem. It is time. Fabric does not like to be folded. And once it's folded, that crease, I call it a knife fold edge, that is where your backing is going to rot. Okay, so in a museum, I don't have anything. Okay, this is headed for the basement. It hasn't gone down there yet. But what you would do with fabric in a museum is they would have some kind of pH neutral material, and the fabric would be rolled around it so it's never folded. Okay, once it creases, that's where it's going to rot. That's why my favorite backing or my favorite binding on a rug is the fold forward binding. That one gets measured out at 1.25 inches. It gets folded in half, so now it's 3/4 of an inch away. That's where it's going to rot. It's going to rot at 3/4 inches away from the loops, right? Then I fold again. That second fold is protected by the layers of rug warp inside it. So it's almost like it's a stuffed finish. Then you whip it. Okay, so when the rug is old and it's deteriorated and someone is repairing it, they are going to pick apart the binding. They're going to fold out that backing, and they're going to find the place where it is rotten, cut that off, and then they're going to have to look at the rest of your rug and rip out what they have to in order to be able to finish it again. It's another reason why I almost always have a border on my rugs. I have a border on my rugs. Jessie Turbain calls it a sacrificial edge. So it's just lines of hooking all the way around as a simple border, a simple picture frame. I'll usually jazz it up with like a beauty line in between, right? But if something happens to that rug, they can undo the binding. They'll have 3/4 of an inch. If they wanted to, could they fold it back? Yeah, But if they felt like they needed more material to get a good binding, they can rip out the sacrificial edge and then rebind it from there. And it'll be a simple matter of rebinding. As someone who's repaired a couple of rugs, not my own, I've repaired 2 rugs, and they were for husbands of rug hookers where the rug hooker had passed away. And they wanted to gift the rug to a daughter, or, in the case of the one Oriental I did. And he says, no one has ever stepped on the edge of this rug, and yet it's falling apart. And it was because it was made out of burlap, and it was folded really close to the loops. So I had to put on extra backing in the back and do a complete repair. And it's a lot easier if there's a sacrificial edge. So I guess going back to Carol, does it matter what you use for a wall hanging or as a mat? No, it's just time. It's just time. And I prefer the feel of rug warp. Rug warp sticks to your grippers like no other backing does. Linen doesn't stick as good. Monk's cloth will stick as good, but I put monk's cloth just 1/2 a step above burlap because monk's cloth stretches. Okay. And you could put you could be hooked perfectly in the ditch, but you do more detail work at the bottom or the top of the rug, and it'll wow out. I was exposed to that lesson after hooking for 2 weeks. I went to Solder Village. I was in Jewel Marie Smith's class, and she says, I want you all to, because we were all like, what's this backing? She was the one who put rug warp down on the table in front of me first. And she says, I want you all to go to the show. She goes, if I didn't point it out to you, you wouldn't have noticed, but it's obvious once you're looking for it. Go to the rug that's on the back wall of the center display. She goes, it's got a wedding and all kinds of little scenes going on. She goes, it's bigger at one end than it is at the other, even though I hooked perfectly in the ditch. And it's simply because monk's cloth will stretch more than the other backings will. So for that reason, in monk's cloth is thin and floppy. It doesn't have much body to it, where rug warp is more like a denim weight. It's heavier, it's thicker, and it lays like a rug. It doesn't tend to get wrinkled on the floor like linen does. Linen tends to develop a wrinkle in it if it's on your rug. And in my lifetime, I don't want to spend a minute straightening a rug on the floor, right? I want it to lay flat as a pancake and then stay there. And rug warp will do that. Okay. So I answered the questions on YouTube. Do any of you here in Zoom have questions? Okay, so so this part's going to be edited out of the replays, but I really need to test something. And the only way I can test something is to have people on YouTube, people in Zoom, all at the same time. So I've got a test for you guys who are watching me on YouTube. If you could tell me if you hear people, and does anyone want to volunteer? Who's okay with going on camera for me? And if no one does, that's fine. Okay, Donna, I'm picking you. She raised her hand first. Okay, it's that easy. So now I can add Donna to YouTube. So Donna, go ahead and say something. And what I'm asking you guys on YouTube about is, can you hear what Donna's saying?
Well, I think rug warp is my favorite backing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like everything about it, and I very seldom use anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Because linen's okay, but it won't stick to my frame, so it drives me crazy.
No, and it doesn't stick to the frame. And the best
No.
part I think about rugwort too is it's a little bit cheaper. It's cheaper than
Well,
linen.
and that's true. It's a whole bunch cheaper. And like you say, it lasts just as long.
It lasts just as long.
This,
Yeah.
this is
The
great
rot
to
rates
hear.
for cotton and linen are really, really close. And the way to think about it is that when they wrapped the pharaohs in Egypt, they used cotton. So, I mean, come on. If it works for the Egyptians way back then and it lasts until now, you know,
I can see why linen is way more expensive if you've ever seen the process
right.
of making
Yeah.
linen from start to finish. It's huge.
Well,
It is. You're
and
right, Donna.
Yeah.
it's an unusual fiber. It's not a fiber that most manufacturers work with, and it's not as readily available. That's why it's more expensive, not that it's better backing.
That's true.
It's
Yeah.
also very hard to spin. Linen is.
Is
Oh.
it? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I would
Oh,
think
yeah.
it would be hard on the fingers.
it is hard on the finger.
I was gonna say
It
it
is.
almost like makes my fingers hurt just thinking about that idea. I love rugwort
Yeah.
because it's hypoallergenic. I don't get any kind of rashes on my arms or because I'll get weird little breakouts from stuff. If I'm working with linen, depending on the kind of linen,
Yeah.
and it might not be the linen fiber I'm allergic to, it's whatever that manufacturer used to process the linen, the chemical that's in it could be what I'm allergic to. So I just
I
avoid it.
sneeze from linen.
You sneeze?
I sneeze from linen.
Okay.
Uh-huh. So now does your YouTube people hear us?
They do. I've gotten several people that says that they can hear you. Okay, so I was confused when I asked, how do I add people from YouTube to my, or people who are here on Zoom, how do I add that to my YouTube broadcast? So I figured it out.
Good.
Okay, so Sharon is saying, can you use 6 and up cut on rugwort, or is rugwort for smaller cuts? When I got started by being introduced to rugwort by Jewel Marie Smith, who's a wide cut hooker, number 8s. I didn't think anything of it until I had a couple ladies at a guild meeting come up to me and go, you're not supposed to use anything over a 6 on rugwort. And I'm like, okay, thanks. It's like, why? I felt like the story of the Emperor's Clothes, and it's like the dude's naked, but no one wants to say it, right? So it's kind of the same thing. You can hook wider cuts on rugwort, but you don't want to say it, or at least you didn't want to say it back in 2000 in front of anybody else, because the matriarchs of rug hooking was telling everybody, no, you can't use it. I've used up to a 9. Is a 9 fun in rugwort? No. But you've got to have the right hook. You've got to have the right technique. So what you need is a wide shank hook, and that's a hook that is bigger at the bottom than it is at the top, right? You're going to expect to pay roughly, I don't know, what are they now with inflation? Probably $100. I used to say anywhere from $50 to $75 for a hook like this, but it's probably more now. What you do with that hook is that you bury it. You stick that hook in all the way down to the very end, and it pushes the fibers away from it, right? And then you pull up the loop. It's not hard. My biggest concern when Terry Dorr, and I've got to look up what year did I start my Samson pillow, because it was that year that Terry Dorr had contacted me, and he said, I am going to be making a new rugwort, and this new rugwort is going to be more loosely woven, and it's going to allow larger cuts. And I was like, okay, that's all fine and dandy, but I still want to be able to hook threes in rugwort. That was another big plus for me, is that I could hook rugwort and everything. I could hook every cut that I wanted to hook in rugwort. So let me share the screen. Nope, that didn't go to the right place. Okay, where's my stop sharing button? Oh man, I hate when that goes away. Okay, there's two ways to play with this. I will take the screen I wanted to share with you and put it on this screen. Okay. So this is my Notion art catalog. It is, I'm going to get rid of this because I can't see what I'm doing with that there. It's a window that's invisible to you, but I can't see through it. This has all my work in it. And where is that Samson? This one right here. Do I have a start date on this? No, I don't. So I haven't looked it up yet. It's in my file directory. I'll know what year I started it. But the year I started this is the first project that I ever did on the new rugwort, which if you've only been hooking for 10 years, all rugwort is the new rugwort because it was more than 10 years ago that it changed. And this was done in threes, and I wanted to be sure that I could use a 3-cut on rugwort. And that's the first project that I did. So between that and my room size rug, I'm getting distracted by, go back to camera. Okay, hold on. I'll get it. It's just not behaving the way I expected. Stuff is not where it's supposed to be. There we go. So, I love rugwort because you can hook any size in it. My room size rug that I just finished relatively recently is done in the old rugwort. We're talking like from 2005 kind of thing. And that one is really tight. And that's mostly 8s and 6s and 7s. 7's my favorite cut size. So I know it's got 7.
Or do you want to keep it for both?
What else? Any other questions? Sharon, that's sweet. Thank you. Yeah, that was a fun rug to hook. I learned a lot about hair on that one. Is there anything else? Lois, did you have your hand up?
There you go. By any chance, can you hold up a piece of rugwort? I think that I use linen. And I don't know I know what monk's cloth looks like, but I'm not sure about what rugwort looks like.
Okay, let me grab this and this and okay. Part of it is you're going to know what it feels like based on the feel of it. Okay. So let me go back to here.
There we go.
So this is rugwort.
Okay. Nice
even weave, very reliable. No surprises. I love it. I have this this piece of monk's cloth only because I got it in an estate.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't use it, but you'll know it's monk's cloth because it's got 2 white lines going through it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll also notice if you look at the weave really quick, it's 2 over and 2 under. So what happens is you get your hook stuck in that in-between spot as a new hooker, and you cannot get your hook to come back out. So I always start rug hookers on rug warp because it's such a dependable backing. And if they have to hook it, rip out, hook it, rip out, hook it, rip out, you can take it. This is a piece of linen. This is unbleached linen. Not all linen is brown like this is. A lot of them are white. But see how it's a little more racky? That doesn't happen as much with rug warp.
Now, when you order patterns, do you generally, I think I've only seen them that you can order them on rug warp or linen. And I don't know what the other one was.
Probably monk's cloth, unfortunately.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So people don't usually offer rug warp?
Well, it depends on the pattern maker. Okay. What do they have in giant rolls available to them to do that? Now, Chris Miller draws her patterns on rug warp, even though her patterns on her website don't offer it. It's because she hasn't figured out how to change her website. I offer my patterns, which are drawn by Chris Miller, on rug warp on my website. So you can definitely order them that way. If you order one of my patterns on my website, I get to keep a little bit extra, is what it amounts to. So I do appreciate it if you go through my website. But you can also go through Chris's, but she does not offer rug warp, even though she draws them on rug warp. So that could be part of it. When I started, one of the couple of things that I would ask teachers at Teachers Workshop, particularly if I was sitting with somebody new, and I always tried to sit with different people at lunchtime, what are your favorite dyes? Do you prefer Cushing or Prochem? What's your favorite backing? To a person, almost, not quite, there was a few outliers, but they almost all said Prochem because Cushing is cost prohibitive. Yeah, you're only buying a little tiny envelope, but you're only getting a little tiny amount. And if you need a lot of dye, you just have to buy a bunch of those envelopes. And we did like a weight comparison on a red, a certain darkness of red, and you would have to buy like 66 envelopes. Or no, that's not what it was. It was $66 back in, using prices from back in the day. It would cost you $66 to get the same amount of dye that you could get for $6 from Prochem. So I'm not talking, it's just a little bit more expensive. It's a lot more expensive. If you buy a pale blue or a pale pink, it costs the same as navy. That doesn't make sense to me because they're putting a ton of filler in there. So Prochem is every color is a different price, and you pay for what you get, but you're not buying filler, you know, unless they've made it cheaper because they know it's a lighter color. If that. But, and if you use just the primary, you know, I wrote a dye book, Dyeing by the Numbers, that uses just 6 colors of dye to make every single color that you see, you know. And once you learn those 6, you can mix anything on your own with a little bit of studying. It doesn't take that long. Students I find get there very quickly. Was somebody talking when I talked over you?
Oh, it's Linda. I really appreciated the discussion around the backings because it is something that's really confused me. And right now I'm finishing up a little kit, and I thought I knew the backing was linen, and I felt like I actually ended up having to use the Puritan because I couldn't get it to stick, the linen to stay on my smaller easy carry frame. but I kept thinking there's something wrong with it, but it just, it doesn't want to stay. It moves a lot. And it's like the second or third time. I mean, naturally, I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong? But I'm interested to try the rugwort because it doesn't want to stay. And I've put it on several different frames.
Yeah. The grippers, even if your grippers are covered, I mean, this is a newer frame that's on this little demo model. But my frame upstairs is covered in threads. And the rugwort still grips just perfectly on that. We had a discussion not too long ago. Someone had asked about replacing the grippers in the Puritan frame, which I recommend you not do unless you absolutely, positively have no other way of getting around it. Because what I'm finding is that the newer strips that they're selling don't fit in the old tracks. Okay. And right now, because they don't make the Puritan frame anymore, all of them are old. They all have the old tracks, right? So instead of fussing over it, what you can do is, if you wanted to clean the fibers out, is to get one of those little cat brushes. You can probably get them at the dollar store or at Walmart, and you just comb it from the inside out. Comb it, that way, and that'll get all the fibers out. Literally, I have not cleaned mine, mainly because the first time I went to Solder Village, I had been hooking for about 10 days. And it was one of those, oh, wait, there's a thing at Solder? Holy cow, that's in my backyard. I need to go. And so I was a last minute sign up, and I went, and honest to God, anybody could look at my frame and tell you are a newbie because there are no threads at all in your frame. And I thought, no, I'm going to keep all those threads, and that's my journey. I'm keeping them all. That's just the way it goes.
Cindy, the question the gal had about ordering patterns on rugwort and not being able to find, a lot of vendors only have linen or monk's cloth. I'm my own self, and when I've looked for patterns, is I'm not sure a lot of vendors understand rugwort and don't understand how good it really is because they've never tried it. So that's why it's not off.
Yeah, that
it's also much easier to put a pattern on.
Yeah.
I mean, because the lines stay put, so you can put your pencil in and draw it.
Yeah. It's so easy to keep your pattern straight on rugwort. The other thing is I've signed up for a class from a teacher I really wanted to take who had patterns that I really liked the pattern of. One of them, it was this one. So this is Creekside Blossom by B. Brock. And I thought I could get lost in this pattern. This looks like fun. I'm going to, and it wasn't too big. It was about the right size, but she didn't do it on rugwort. And I thought, okay, this is too big for me to be messing around with linen or something else. So I negotiated with her and said, okay, what if I send you a piece of rugwort and you put it on for me? Because it's your pattern. And I says, or I can buy one on burlap, which she offered the pattern on burlap, and then I'll transfer it myself. And then I'll destroy the burlap. What do you prefer? I prefer to not have to draw my own pattern, but I will if I have to. So she came back and she said, send me the rugwort. I'll draw it for you on rugwort. So then she got the rugwort and she says, it's too thick. I can't see through it. She must have been using a light box instead of red dot or something like that. And that might be old rugwort because that's an older rug. So then I sent her red dot, and then I finally got it, and I got the bill to go with it. I was expecting some kind of a credit because I didn't use her backing. I paid full price for the pattern, even though I paid for the backing, but I was fine with that. because there was no way I wanted to hook that in linen, but I really wanted to hook that pattern. So that was my way around. But other teachers that I've dealt with, Deanne Fitzpatrick was one of them, gave me a credit, since I sent them the backing. So it just depends on what that particular teacher wants it and how bad you want it on rugwort, right? But if you do order it on something like burlap, then that burlap is only good for the garden. You take it out and you use it as, a cover around your tomato plants or whatever so weeds don't grow. You do not give it away for someone else. Don't leave it just folded up and on your shelf, because when you pass away, someone's going to sell that pattern, which would be a violation of the copyright law. I destroy it. I either cut it in half, I'll flip it over, grit it out, and make it a texture sampler, or it goes more likely. What usually happens is the burlap patterns will go out in the garden because they work pretty good for that kind of thing. Or I think one burlap pattern, I've never hooked the pattern though, but I bought it at a garage sale, and it was just such big, beautiful flowers. It ended up covering up some styrofoam that I think came with a refrigerator or some kind of large appliance. And boom, instant bulletin board. I love it because it's covered in an old burlap pattern, and it cost me nothing because I had the pattern. So away you go. So Carol is saying, she goes, I love dyeing wool fiber, but she uses jacquard or Dharma dyes. You can definitely use the other dyes. The theories or the instruction in my dye book is the formulas are based on ProChem. But all the theories, all the methods, all of that is based on dyeing. So you could use that dye book if you needed to learn how to do spot dyes or gradation swatches, or name the technique, right? It's more of a how-to dye book rather than, most dye books are formulas. This one happens to have 64 formulas, but it's a how-to dye book, not meant for just the formulas. Okay, I've got all the questions on YouTube taken care of. What about you guys on Zoom? Any questions there? No. Okay. I think I'm ready to end it. Just as a reminder, I have the 4 o'clock hook-in starting today at 4 o'clock. It is a bit more of a social gathering but we share a lot of information. I always seem to learn something, so I'm excited every week for that to come around. And for those of you who attend on a regular basis, I'll see you there at 4 o'clock. So that's it for now, guys. See you later.